Hey guys, so we're going to talk about distribution right now. Now I think a lot of aspiring artists are a little confused of what distribution means, what it entails, how it helps you, how do you get distribution. I think they wrap it up a lot with other things. So I have my buddy here, LaManna, who's the CEO and co-founder of Video, which is, I consider, one of the greatest independent distributors available for aspiring artists.
Same.
Yeah, makes sense. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
High five. So what we're going to talk about is he's going to help walk you guys through what distribution is. So there'll be complete clarity, and it'll simplify the process of how you can get a distribution deal and or how you can distribute your music effectively. So first, I'd like to start off by asking you, like I said in the intro, a lot of people I think do confuse what distribution is. Mm-hmm. Can you explain exactly what it means to have distribution and what distribution for a project means?
Yeah, so in the music ecosystem, you have your artists and your creators and your content owners, and then on the other side you have your digital service providers, which are referred to as the DSPs. Yeah. And so the DSPs are the Apples, the Spotifys, and the YouTubes of the world, and there's about 200 of them globally, and so
200 DSPs available for people to distribute their music.
Yeah, I mean, and that's right now sitting here in January 2020, and we expect that number to grow significantly as we kind of enter into more of a global music market, right?
Now, when you say over 200, you're talking YouTube, Vimeo, Spotify, Apple, all those types of things.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and there's other ones like Ghana, TikTok, and Savin, and Boomplay, and Symphi.
So basically anything where you can put your music.
Yeah, and so we're being based in the U.S. I mean, you're primarily know and understand the DSPs that are popular here, right? So, but that's not always the case if you're an artist or you're a consumer in a country like Indonesia or Nigeria. So if you're in Nigeria, I mean, you want to get your music up on Boomplay. And so, like I said, as we kind of enter into more of a global music market, we find that people are consuming music in all different territories, from all different territories, and so so when you actually want to kind of hit the full ecosystem, there's about 200 of them, or 200 plus globally. Right. At this point.
So we just mentioned that there's a lot of outlets to distribute your project and your music. But what does distribution mean exactly to somebody new?
And so as such, what in that ecosystem, you have your digital service providers, your content owners. The digital service providers, the 200 digital service providers don't really want to do deals or license content from millions of artists around the world, right? It's just not an efficient process. And so, what they really do is kind of rely on companies like ours, which are, referred to as distribution companies, but are really essentially like content aggregators. So the relationship is that we'll have, a relationship with, 200,000 plus artists and 200 plus DSPs, and we kind of, we clear all the content on behalf of the artist, and then we do the licensing deals with the digital service providers. So we really kind of act as a middleman between those two organizations.
Right. So how does somebody find a company like yours or another distribution company to get into business with you guys, so that you guys can do that and help amplify their music and get it on all these 200 plus platforms? Yeah,
I mean, so each one of the distributors, and ourselves included, kind of have a specific niche that we really focus in on. So for instance, for us, we really focus in on what we refer to as the middle market. And the middle market is essentially independent rights holders that are artists or managers or labels that have some sort of infrastructure. So we tend not to do deals with an artist might be starting off and through their career, their kind of needs change, right? And so when you're an artist, then I mean, obviously you're an artist, and so day one, no matter who you are, whether you're Justin Bieber or Ariana Grande or whoever, it all starts with you by yourself in your room making music.
Right.
And at that point, really what you need is just access, meaning that you need to go through an intermediary just to give you access to make your music available.
Right.
And that's what services like TuneCore, CD Baby of the world really provide is access. Mm-hmm. At the next level up is kind of where we reside, which is more in the middle market, which is you're still independent, you own and control your rights, but you have some level of infrastructure. You're generating revenue. You have a manager, you have an agent, you have people around you that really kind of need tools and support, so you need better data, better royalty processing. And so, the most important thing when it comes to distribution is really kind of finding, it's always like right fish in the right pond, right?
Right.
So depending on where you're at in your career, different things are more important to you.
Right.
And so, you really need to kind of find the right distributor that makes the most sense. So we don't have a policy of 100% royalties back to back to the artist. We invest a lot in artists, we give them working capital, and the reason why is because they generally have some sort of track record that
Right.
is investable, and so
Right.
they'll use that money to do that. That's something different than the model, like I said, like a TuneCore might do, where they're charging you fees to distribute content, and generally speaking, you're not making as much money at that level.
Right. So that leads me to ask, what can an artist expect from a distribution company? If somebody was to sign a deal with you guys,
Yeah.
what do they expect you guys to do, and what do you guys provide to
Yeah.
artists?
So I think any artist.
And when I say you guys, I mean independent distributors.
Yeah, exactly.
At your level.
So I think what any artist should expect, regardless of where they're at in their career, should expect the ability to have some sort of dialogue with their distributor, right? So there's a big issue right now, which is especially at that kind of lower entry level market, let's just say, where they could send an email out and not get a response, right?
Right.
And so access is important, but one of the most important things is that you're working with a company that actually is responsive to you. And so a lot of times people might want to be part of a an organization that is bigger than them or has more a better roster than them, and they do everything to kind of get there. But if they're not answering your emails or picking up your the phone when it rings, it really does you no good, because you're going to find problems along the way. You're going to find maybe some rights management issues, some people who may make claims to your music. If there's licenses or clearances that need to go on, you really
So
need
you're saying
the help
a
of the
distributor will help with all that?
Yeah, a distributor. I mean, right now, in 2020, a good distributor should be able to help you kind of navigate the ecosystems and any sort of problems or opportunities that might arise.
So they can help. They can help you have bulletproof business when you're releasing music. They can make sure that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted, so that you don't have any legal issues.
Yeah, I mean that's the last thing you want, right? Is that
Right.
I mean, we've seen it happen before, which is where you might have a song, you look at even Lil Nas X or whatever. It's that song was distributed, it gets put out, and then you find out that it was actually it wasn't properly cleared. It was a beat that was taken. I forget, in that particular case, but we'll see it all the time where a beat might be taken from YouTube and
a beat website.
Exactly,
Right.
and the artist that's using it doesn't really know and understand the proper licenses that need to be in place.
They think it's cool because it's on the internet. They put it up there for me to rap on it.
Yeah, exactly. It puts you in a really kind of precarious situation. If that takes off and does really well, you find out that you're actually infringing on someone else's rights, and so your negotiating leverage is significantly compromised, as a result of that. So first and foremost, I mean, I do think that the most important thing when it comes to distributor is having some sort of response, which is why for us, we originally had an open ecosystem that anyone could sign up, and we actually closed it precisely because we had too many people signing up. Right. And I didn't think it was fair to the artists that signed up that we weren't able to really kind of help them and support them at the level that they needed support. So we actually closed it off and kind of limited the amount of artists that we would bring onto the platform to make sure that everyone that we do work with has a very good experience.
So when you say bring people onto the platform, what do you mean? Because I don't think that independent distributors have an open door policy for any rapper or singer or artist to just come and say, hey, distribute my music, correct?
Well, some of them do, right? So if we're looking at the kind of vertical space of distribution, I mean, you could sign up to TuneCore,
right? The CD Baby, TuneCore, those things.
Yeah,
like that.
and those are
an independent distributor that has the infrastructure that, say, a video has.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What is your recruitment process? How do you decide whether you're going to distribute an artist or not?
So most of it is just by referrals, right? So we have an application process, and we have people that review those applications on a daily basis to make sure that they're reviewing those things. But generally speaking, within the video platform, you could recommend someone to the platform that automatically bring them in. And that's, like, so when you're an artist, like, you're part of a community of other artists. And so, you're an artist, you work with producers, the producers work with other artists, and that's the kind of, and then they have really good experiences, and by word of mouth, they invite their friends. And that drives, 95% of our business is just referrals from doing a good job.
Wow, so independent distributors are almost like record labels where they have A&Rs finding talent to sign.
Well, yeah, we actually don't. So, like, we don't really have that much like cold outreach. Like, I mean, most of it, like I said, it's just inbound, and it's just the idea that, like, we've worked with you in the past, and we kind of show you and have a, provide you with, like, a really good experience. And so when someone comes to you and say, what distributor should I work with? You say, okay, you should work with Vidya, get in contact with Roy or Mark or whoever, and then we look at you as a person, just like we do with any of our users, of, like, people who kind of have their ear to the ground and, like, wouldn't recommend us unless they felt like it was a good match, and then we work with them, and that drives, like I said, about 95% of our business.
Right.
5% of our business comes from, like, every once in a while someone will fill out an application, and they'll fill out their information, their social media, their management. I mean, we're looking for, we really want to work with artists that are surrounded by really good teams. So independent artists that have a manager or a business counterpart that is really kind of like, where the relationship between the artist and the manager is, like, the manager is operating all the business, and then the artist is free to do their creative. And that's the best environment for us. We actually prefer not to necessarily deal directly with the artist, because that's a skill set that's really meant for managers that could kind of navigate, like, the emotional process of of essentially selling art.
So if we had to do a checklist, what an artist should expect a distributor to do for them, let's run down a quick checklist of what they should expect a distributor to do.
So they should give you, like, transparent terms, right? So, like, a lot of times you should know, like, what the terms that you're entering into. So, like, what is the revenue split? How does the money get handled? What sort of term are you getting locked into? All that stuff should be explicit, and, like,
term meaning the length of time that.
Well, really the contractual obligation that you're entering into when you sign on to a distributor. So a lot of times people will kind of click through licenses, and then they'll find out that they've locked themselves into, like, a 2 or 3 year term. So if something that turns out really big, like, they then need to go back and renegotiate. And that's again a very bad position to be into. So, like, when we do our contracts through the website, we actually have the contract, but at the very top of it, it explicitly kind of shows and says, this is the term, this is the split, this is, so even if you're not a
really
lawyer,
simplifies
you could very much, like,
now,
understand.
do all distributors do that?
No, they don't.
No, so that's something specific to video.
Yeah, that's something
which makes video great.
It's one of the things that make it great.
So so those are some of the things that they can expect.
So transparent terms. A company that responds to you and that, like, answers your emails or answers your phone calls. Something that, like, you want to look for a company that really has, like, a direct to the source kind of relationship. What I mean by that is that there's a lot of, like, front end shops here that might use us or some other company as, like, as a middleman. So so for instance, like, it's like, Clint Sparks to Vidya, and then Vidya has the relationship with, like, Spotify and the other DSPs. What happens a lot of times is that, like, it might be Clint Sparks to another distributor, to Vidya, to us, or to, the sort of, and it doesn't have to be us, but, like, essentially there'll be, like, people that call themselves, or websites that call them distributors, and they might offer you, like, a 90-10 deal. Well, if they have a 90-10 deal with you, and then you think you're getting 90% of the revenue, but they don't have a direct deal with Spotify, for instance, and there's another company that they have to go through because they don't have the direct deal, and they might be getting 25%. So now all of a sudden, like, you're not actually getting the 90% you think you are, because there's a company between the company that says they're a distributor, but really is just a reseller of another company's services.
So what is, I want to come back
and that's not bad, by the way. It just should be disclosed in the process, right? So in other words, like, if a lot of companies will use us as, like, the technology to power their distribution, and so let's just say we offer them, because they deal in volume, like, a 90-10 deal, and if they're offering you a 90-10 deal, they should be up front and say, hey, this is really an 80-20. Like, you're getting 80% of the revenue here because we have a partner behind. Whether they say it's a partner or not, they should disclose, how the money flows is very important.
So what would be well, I want to make sure the checklist is done. What else would they be doing? So I think one of the things that a lot of artists don't understand or I'm not clear on is that
Yeah.
for the most part, a distributor, figuratively speaking, takes your music and puts it on the shelf.
Yeah.
They don't go tell the world it's on the shelf.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
just
that's
put
a
it there
big-
so it's
yeah.
available.
Yeah.
And then it's your job with your promotions and your
Yeah.
PR to go
Yeah.
tell everybody, hey, my music is available. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, I mean that's a common misconception. Is that distributor's not a record label, right? So
Right.
they're not going to replace your manager, which is precisely why, like when we enter into these agreements, like we really only work with artists that have managers or have
Right.
some sort of like built-in, business capabilities. Because what we find is that when you deal directly with the artist and you do that, not only is are you dealing with really like someone who's kind of emotional about the business aspect of it, which as you know is a, like I said, a specialized skill set that managers possess, which is dealing with creatives, but also like they tend to rely on you to do that business component of it. So even if you say to them, say, okay, well, we're only really distributing content, making
Yeah.
it available, and doing like the metadata and all the kind
Right.
of boring behind the scenes stuff, they still feel like that it doesn't really do you any good unless
Right.
like you're promoting it, and especially early on. Like I don't care what company you're with, like the promotion falls on you. You know,
Right.
as the artist, as the manager, you could be signed to the biggest label in the world. Like all the early artist development of all the successful artists I've seen, like has been like really done by that kind of internal camp.
Yep.
And whether it's like the Baby and Carter and like Dre London, Post Malone, like they had these like this kind of like small ecosystem that they were like doing all the grassroots stuff themselves and kind of started
Right.
that fire.
So what would you say is the biggest misconception that artists that you deal with or that you hear that they think a distributor should be doing for them and they shouldn't be doing?
Yeah, I mean, most of it is, I think the thing that they think we should be doing is doing more promotion and marketing for them,
Right.
and doing like really providing more of the label services. And that doesn't say that we don't necessarily do that. I mean, we have in certain cases where like if content's doing really well, like we'll actually supply them with a budget, we'll hire outside marketing people, but it's not something that's like guaranteed just by nature of us working together.
So what do you think an artist should do to help a distributor amplify their project and their music to get DSPs excited to want to put their music on their platforms?
Yeah, I mean, so the biggest thing is like, I guess there's two parts to that question. One is that like the best thing an artist could do is make sure that their content and their intellectual property is like their house is in order in regards
Yep.
to that, right? So like they need to make sure that like the beats are original, the producers are cleared, because the last thing you want to do is have like is put all your time, money, and effort into like blowing something up, having it really successful, and then finding out that like you kind of built your house on someone else's land, right?
Yeah.
And that's like the most important thing.
That's part of the bulletproof business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So you need to make sure that you have that kind of house in order. From there, it's like everyone's kind of you're always trying to solve that chicken or the egg dilemma, right? So it's
Right.
like everyone says like, okay, well, I want to get playlisting, and playlisting is like and then when you go back to them and say, okay, well, what are your bullet points? And saying, okay, well, I would be popular if they gave me playlisting, but they
Right.
want to know that I'm popular before they give me playlisting.
Right.
So how do I solve that?
Right, and this is an important, this
Yeah.
is a super important thing for you. This is what you really need to listen to, because a lot of people think
Yeah.
that if I just get on playlists, I'll blow up. If
Yeah.
my video just goes viral, it'll blow up. But what you don't understand is that these DSPs need a story about you for them
Yeah.
to even want to put you on there in the first place. So you think they need to put you on there to blow you up. They look at it like you need to do some stuff to blow up for us to put you on here.
Yeah, and that's a very difficult thing for like any for an artist to solve, and it's a difficult thing for anyone to solve, right? Same thing with us as a business, right? It's that you want to get the dope artists onto your platform. How do you get them on if you don't have other artists?
Right.
So
Would you say that that's one of the benefits of a strong relationship distributor, is that you can get a little less traction but have the relationships and be able to convince like a DSP, for instance, like, oh, well, they're doing this, they're doing that, and they believe you more because you have the relationship, or they see the potential of this artist and are willing to take a chance more than an artist that doesn't have a distribution.
Yeah, so like
situation.
so I have a unique perspective because I started, I also own a marketing company, so I have a digital marketing background or whatever. So like there's a couple things to keep in mind when it comes to that stuff, right? So like one of them is and I'll kind of rewind it to like how the music, it really, things haven't changed. They're just the vehicle and how it happens is a little bit different. But like, when you, back in the day, right, if the A&R people would go to like clubs and they'd like find artists and they would sign them. They wouldn't, And what they'd find is that
Before
like
social media.
before social media, right? Exactly. And so what they would find is that like it would be like, all right, this is the dopest hip hop artist in Detroit, right?
Right.
Everyone in Detroit's talking about this guy. Everyone's and then the label will come in, they would sign him, and then they would bring him out to the masses, right? And so, like I said, the mechanism itself has changed, but the idea hasn't. So when you're talking about playlisting, the most important thing is that you want to show that there's traction on like a local level, at least as like so get some traction that like you kind of feel like that. Like if we go to the DSPs and be like, hey, there's a fire here, and if we poured gasoline on it, it'd get really big, right? So you want to show like, so.
And you guys are the reporters of the little fire here to the DSPs.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
And they'll take our, so we tend not to try and pitch things that don't make, a kind of a mutually beneficial situation.
Wolf.
Exactly, because otherwise they wouldn't, they wouldn't return our phone calls,
Right.
or they wouldn't, answer our emails. And so like, we want to pitch stuff that makes sense, and we're upfront about that. Like when we pitch it, that like there needs to be some sort of like traction that's going on. So like, it could be something small, right? So in other words, like you don't need like, let's just say like you don't need 500,000 followers. You could have 30,000 followers, but then like every single time you put up a video or you put up like a song or a post, like it gets a lot of engagement, right? And so like the engagement numbers are going up. And so the biggest thing that I talk about when I talk about promotion is the word velocity. Velocity means everything. So velocity or momentum. So it's like, are you growing? Is every single time you do something bigger than the last time? Are you having like normal, like really good engagement? So you could say, hey, like here's an artist, like they're doing this tour, or there's some sort of like movement or kind of increased velocity of like the trajectory that they feel like as a digital service provider, like whether it's Spotify or Apple, that if they're not on it, they're gonna wish, what I'm saying? Like they don't want to be the ones that break an artist. They want to be the ones that like, get on the artist early. Yeah. So like they want to know that like with or without their help, that this artist is going to be bigger next year.
Yeah, they just
going to do it anyway, and they want to be on for the ride. And so that's really the way to kind of think about it. Is that like which is why it's always important to kind of do like everything at the right time and the right place. It's like and so when you're
setting up a plan.
I mean, content is king, right? And so like I just had a meeting with one of our partners, and he had an artist that was distributed through us, and it ended up being like the #1 trending song on TikTok, right? Yeah. And it was big. It was massive. It was making a ton of money. It was about the 50th song that he released with that artist. Yeah. So in other words, like he was just like, we're putting stuff out, like and he realized that like that content was king, and just keep putting out content. And then by the time he had the hit, it was the
that was the 50th record.
It
took him to break.
Yeah.
Because they kept putting out content.
And he was signed to like to basically like a what was the equivalent of like a kind of like a major independent player in the space previously. Yeah. Like he had had the team behind him, and he just kept hacking away, just kind of keeping putting out
Just so
content.
I'm clear, you're telling me it took the 50th record to break for this artist?
Yeah, I mean we see it a lot of times. I mean, especially like when we're seeing like the one thing that I've seen like change in the last couple of years is like the idea that like there's really no such thing as being oversaturated when it comes to content.
Content. It's the dirt pile strategy.
Yeah. And there's no, so it's just like, go out there, and it doesn't need to be like this like ultra planned out like, release. Like we'll see, we work with one artist, he releases content, he just puts it out on SoundCloud. Every week he'll put up something on SoundCloud, and then he'll get like some traction on the song. And then once the song like gets some traction, then he'll put out, he might like make it more official, do a release of it, do a video on it, and then like, and then each one just needs to be bigger than the last time.
Do you think that's a proper way to release music? Just kind of throw it on SoundCloud and see if you get some traction. And if you do, and you don't have many people following your SoundCloud page, how would one get traction or get people to come listen to their music to decide I got to go bigger than just on SoundCloud now?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the audience reaction kind of speaks.
But what if you don't have an audience yet on SoundCloud?
I mean, everything at the end of the day. So I'm of the mindset, and I've spoken to a lot of people like this, is that like I don't think that there's anyone out there that's creating really great music that isn't getting the attention that they deserve, right? And so like I think that you need to go back and like, I've seen people with no resources, no money, no infrastructure, no connections, just make a song, put it up there, and see it blow up.
And
right?
it works,
and it just works. And so, I think there's an overemphasis on like the idea that like you need to be like in a certain place or have a certain manager. Like, like I think that the best manager is the guy that picks up the phone, or the girl, whoever picks up the phone every single time you call, right? It's like not necessarily saying that this manager also manages this big artist, because like they're not picking up your call. Like your lawyer should pick up your phone, your manager should pick up the phone, your distributor should pick up the phone. If everyone on your team doesn't pick up the phone when you call them, you need to change.
You need a new team.
You need a new team. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so like when it comes to like creating music, I mean, I just think that like it's, if you're putting it out and it's not getting the traction that it deserves, I think you just need to look back at the music and either create more content or revise the content or do something. I really think that I don't think that there's anyone out there like creating something that is going to be like massive or like that is being like largely ignored. I mean, I see stuff all the time that like like you said, with no money, no resources,
What would you say? What would you say to the artist that's
up.
listening to you right now, saying, "But I got the hottest music out.
Yeah,
if the right person sees me, we can make $1 billion together." Because I'm sure you hear that. I hear it all the time. What would you say to that artist that thinks they have the best music in the world?
I would go back 6 months and say, "What about this song?" And they'd be like, "I don't like that song anymore." Because that's the other thing that you hear artists say all the time, right? So artists say, "This is the dopest shit in the world," and then 6 months later, they're like, "Fuck that! This is the dopest shit in the world." They're constantly like really thinking that the new stuff is great and the old stuff is bad. And so like, I think at the end of the day, the consumer makes a decision. They decide and they listen, and if they like it, I mean, there's nothing that like, so if I listen to like something and if I hear like a hip hop artist or any sort of artist, I just think it's like absolutely amazing, right? I don't look in and say, oh well, who's their manager, who's their director? You know what I do? I tell my friends about it,
right?
Which is why from our perspective, we have like a no sales kind of policy of like all we have to do is just create a good experience, and I guarantee you that you will tell your friends. So like, there's no one on planet Earth that like will go to a restaurant, eat it, have the best meal of their lives, and be like, I'm not telling anyone about this place.
Or I got to know who the manager of this restaurant is.
Yeah. They don't care. They don't care who the chef is. Are you having a good time? So are you listening? When you listen to music, do you like it? One person. It's what they like in the tech world. It's a viral coefficient, right? They want to know. They don't care how many people do you have. They want to know like how many people that are listening or experiencing, or using your service, how many of those people are telling their friends? If they're not telling their friends, it doesn't matter. Like you need a very small segment. So if you're playing it for 10 people, and if all 10 people like never listen again and never tell their friends about it, well, the problem isn't, hey, I need to get the song in front of 1 million people. The problem is
you can't even get 10 people to like it.
Yeah. So like, so if you're getting like, if you're getting 1,000 plays, right, and you're looking at it, and like, let's just say you're looking at your YouTube analytics, and you're getting 1,000 plays, and you're not getting anyone who shares it. It's like, all right, well, the problem isn't, hey, I need to get in front of 1,000 more. These 1,000 were idiots, Like the problem is that like people, they don't want to share your content.
Right.
And I think that's again, like that's one of the big reasons why it's so important to have like the business counterpart that's there, because that's a very difficult decision to make for the artists themselves. Because the artist is like so emotional, because that song might be about your girlfriend leaving you, it might be about your father dying or something like that. And so like the idea that you wrote this like very emotional, impactful song, and then like no one wants to share it or use it or do whatever, like it's very hard to make that decision. And so like that's why it's very important to have someone who can kind of look at things like more objectively and kind of help you like kind of hone in on it.